I'm delighted to welcome back Konstantin Samoilov to the channel. You will know that he is one of the most respected voices on YouTube about what is happening inside Russia. He is a well-known tuber whose Inside Russia channel comments insightfully on his country's descent into authoritarianism over the last few years. And of course, as you will also know, he's outside Russia with no hope at the moment of when he can return there. We do monthly conversations. I think they are incredibly valuable to look at what is going on with the Russian economy, what is going on with the Russian war machine, and what may affect its capacity to wage war. And I think this episode will be no less fascinating as all the others have been as well. Before we get into this, I want to remind you to check out the validated Ukrainian charities that appear in the description of the video. And please also do help out if you can. Creators like Konstantin and I put a huge amount of effort into the materials we're making, and it's not always appreciated by the platforms we use. So please do check out Konstantin's Patreon and any other way in which you might be able to support him, continue the important work that he does. Konstantin, welcome back.
Jonathan, hello, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure as usual. It's been quite some time, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Well, we started out with a huge list, which meant we probably have been talking for 6 hours, but we've whittled it down to a couple of topics. The economy, of course, features in that, and we are going to have a look as well at how Kursk is affecting the propaganda narratives and potentially the regime's behavior and perception amongst the Russians who remain in Russia. Well, we'll come to that in a minute. Let's start with the economy. It feels like Russia is returning to the immediate economic crisis that happened in the wake of the full-scale war. Is this an impression that you are getting as well?
Jonathan, I am absolutely sure that the crisis started on February 24th, 2022. The first missile that flew to Ukraine, that's when the crisis started. And it was decided back then, the economic fate of Russia. I believe in that. It's taken longer than I thought and many other experts thought. The crisis started developing, but then things got a little better due to different reasons. And now, it's back to normal. Russian economy is not doing well. The signs are everywhere. And it's basically a very logical outcome of things.
And one of the things we saw is the interest rate, the base rates has risen to 19%. Now, I'm not an economist, but it seems that interest rates at that level are really going to throttle off a lot of economic activity. But that's not the only thing, is it? There are multiple pressures. It's a perfect storm that is hitting the economy, but certainly that 19% base rate cannot help.
It's going to finish off any growth of Russian economy. That weren't much, but 19%. And this is not the end. Okay, we're down the middle of the road right now. I'm expecting the central bank increase the interest rate by another percent, sometimes in fall. I believe they meet in a few weeks in October. It's going to be 20, and then they're going to be increasing. Now, they're trying to keep inflation under control, but they cannot do that because you have to raise interest rate. That's what, the Western economic model is. You have to dry economy out of money. So what the central bank is doing, it's raising the interest rate, and at the same time, Russian state keeps on flooding economy with money. It's just from a different side. So this increased interest rate will not help to keep the inflation down when we are seeing the results. It's going to be galloping inflation. I think among economy scholars, there's term galloping inflation. That's where inflation goes over 20%. And I think we're seeing it in Russia already. I think it's safe to say that inflation is galloping, and it will continue to get more and more out of hand. By this high interest rate is killing the businesses. Imagine you have a small business and you borrow at 23%. Is it possible? No. So goodbye, Russian businesses.
I have this impression of a boat that is rapidly taken on water. You've got Elvira Nabiulina, who's with a bucket trying to slop the water out from one side, and you've got Vladimir Putin punching holes in the other end of the boat. Nabiulina and her colleagues must know that this is a hopeless task. They must know that these levers of traditional economic sort of, let's say, control over the economy are practically useless in these circumstances.
She does know. She's a very smart person. She's very experienced economist. She knows. And this is a good question. What is she thinking? I think she was given a task, a goal, by her boss, and she is following the orders. She's keeping the ruble stable. What is happening with the economy and the rest of issues, none of her business. I think she was clearly given her responsibility, and then she's acting according to the order. I don't see any other explanation. I'm sorry.
I mean, that, or one may think that possibly there are threats against her family and so on. I mean, to remain in such a hopeless job with a hopeless task, looking at some of her speeches and other speeches of central bankers and economics experts, they tend to give a kind of reality or let slip a reality, which of course the propagandists are not allowed to do. And you can almost see some of those concerns etched on their faces when they're talking.
Except for with one correction. They started giving the reality after May of this year. Okay, before May, they painted a very different picture. And please notice that after May, after Vladimir Putin was inaugurated and made another, old new president of Russia, it's Elvira Nabiulina and her employees, deputies. Before, it was just her, and that is very important. And the picture she painted in February, in March, was much rosier than she painted in May, okay? Because she was sugarcoating the reality. She was blowing dust into the eyes of Russians, okay? We are seeing this inflational factors going down, things are getting better. And I was sitting there and listening to her and trying to, clean my eyes. I couldn't believe my eyes. What is she saying? But then things turned absolutely different tone of voice, different facts. We're not seeing any improvement. Well, we said otherwise a couple months ago. It doesn't matter, So she had orders to sugarcoat the reality. And she did for some time. But the thing is, it's really hard when you are the head of the central bank and you're dealing with numbers such as inflation. People go to a store and they see the prices. You can tell them whatever you want, but they see the prices, and sooner or later you have to answer for your words. So he said, okay, I'm gonna tell them the truth. And she started sharing her press conferences with deputies, and deputies just telling it like it is.
And there are other things beyond the control of the regime. One of those, of course, is oil prices. And it seems that a slide in global oil prices is going to hit Russia hard, or hit Russia's war machine hard. And this has always been the case. It was the collapse in global oil prices which put the final straw on the back of the Soviet Union, and on top of the defeat in Afghanistan and then the drop in oil prices, that pretty much collapsed the system at that point. It wasn't the deficit of goods in the shops, that was dramatic enough, and that's what we all saw in the media. But actually, it's other things that break a system like that. Russia cannot control the oil price, despite its connections with Middle Eastern regimes and so on. This is a very serious problem. And of course, you've got Denmark and hopefully some other allies who are starting to put some real pressure on the so-called Grey Fleet tankers as well.
You're absolutely right. That is a huge problem for Russia right now. And this is just the beginning, the trend of cheap oil. Because these trends, they go in cycle after cycle. Oil goes up, then goes down depending on performance of many economies. China and the US, number one and number two. Well, the US is number one, China is number two. China is not doing well. That is driving demand for oil down. Therefore, the prices go down. Russia had a very lucky time in 2022. It allowed the economy to float for much longer than everyone expected. Okay, but that luck is over, and the harsh reality is affecting Russia very much. Like I've been saying, it's a perfect storm, the tsunami, economic tsunami that is hitting Russia, and this is it. We're seeing it right now.
And it's an irony, isn't it, that not many people, I think, have really talked about, and that is that I'm not necessarily saying this is a good thing, but Putin's counting on a Trump victory. I think it's quite clear that he and his propagandists believe they'll be in a better position with Trump than they will be with Harris. My own view is that both have their weaknesses, and neither is ideal for Ukraine. It could also be that Trump might be weak on providing weapons to Ukraine, but he might also kick off a global drilling bonanza for oil, etc., which of course will drop the price further. So there's interesting things up ahead, and actually, maybe neither scenario is particularly good for Putin, depending on the US election, especially if energy prices are going to carry on falling.
I think that's the idea that he had, kind of like hope of last resort. Oh, something will change in the United States, and that will miraculously help me out. Okay. Well, when you don't have any other hopes, the last one is really hard to let go. Okay. It's wishful thinking. And I have no clue where they got this idea that Trump would be elected and save Russia. Donald Trump was the president of the United States of America for 4 years, from 2016 to 2020. Did he do anything to help Russia? Did he even meet with Putin once, face to face? I think they saw each other briefly once
they,
or
they, they
twice
met in
at
Helsinki.
G20.
Yeah.
Not G8 because Russia was kicked out and now it's G7, but just briefly, okay? And that's it. And for 4 years, Trump didn't do anything to remotely help Russia or even speak to the president. Why in the world do they keep on thinking that Trump this time is going to be so much different? This is just insane.
And the pressure on the Putin regime is also manifesting because of Ukraine's drone strikes against the oil refineries and certain energy infrastructure. Now, at the moment, they seem to be only hitting utilities which have either pure military use or dual use as military and civilian. But already there is some conversation about there being an export ban on fuel oils in Russia for one of the world's largest oil producing countries. That's a fairly extreme thing to bring in. Should we keep an eye on that? Is that going to be an indicator of more problems down the line as we head into winter? And one would assume the demand for fuel oils will rise as the temperature drops.
Jonathan, Russian oil refining industry have always historically been the problem. Okay, it's much worse now due to the strikes, and Ukrainians certainly know what they're doing, and they're doing it well, and they're reaching their goals. But even before the Ukrainians, see, Russia type of the country where it's incredibly rich in natural resources. And whoever controls the country, the people in power, the strong men, they get the control of the resources. And they don't have to make products or process the resources or make products, or all they have to do is export raw materials. Oil. You don't have to refine oil and sell gasoline. All you have to do is build a pipeline to Europe, and there you go. For decades, you're all set. Your children are all set. You're one of the richest people in the world. And you share with the officials, of course, the KGB, and that this is how the system works. So that system never allowed for development of new technologies, not needed. Competition, what competition? For what? We are selling raw materials, or metals, not metal products made out of metals in Russia. No, 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 no. The Chinese buy our metals, and that's, they sell us things back. Now, the oil refining industry was developed enough to provide gasoline and diesel fuel to Russian domestic market. The exporting of Russian refined fuels was never a big thing, right? It did happen, but it was never huge. Now, what Ukrainians did, they broke the balance. They bombed quite a few oil refineries, among them two crucial ones. Well, I'd say three: Volgograd, Omsk, and Moscow. The Moscow refinery, I've been there many times. It's located, I don't know, 30 kilometers, 20 to 30 kilometers from the Kremlin. It's right in the city. You know, Omsk refinery is number one in Russia. It provides Russia with 10% of gasoline and diesel fuel. And so is brand new facility in Volgograd or near Volgograd. So definitely it's a huge blow to the economy because it fuels inflation. Okay, less fuel available, it costs more, and anything you do, any product you create, you have to use oil for transportation, for production, for anything, and consumer goods. I mean, oil for gas for consumers is going to be raising in prices. It's already up. Okay, wholesale prices are through the roof right now, and people will be feeling the heat at the pumps sometimes around November because it usually there's a 2 month lag or something like that. And you know, this is huge. Perhaps even will be ratios for regular people, just like in the USSR. It's incredible. It's a blow to the army because it becomes more difficult to get. Although I'm pretty sure army will be supplied top priority, but still it puts a lot of pressure and puts lots of pressure on the economy.
These are very, very far away. I mean, it just so happens that I've been to Omsk, and it's a long, long way from Moscow. If that was hit, it's extraordinary. I also heard that Murmansk was hit. That again is quite a long way from central Russia. It's quite in the far north. I had the pleasure of going on a day trip there. Um, whatever wealth is mined out of the ground in Murmansk, it certainly isn't invested in the town because it's a very, very rundown place. Another place that was hit was Kaluga, which I've also been to. So it seems that Ukrainian drones are following my tourist map around Russia. But these places are a long way away from Moscow, and it's extraordinary achievement for Ukraine. I understand that the US is potentially still putting pressure on them to stop. And yet this seems to be working. Is it your view that Ukraine should continue to pile on the pressure? because it seems that this is one of those pressure points where they can really, inflict some damage on Putin's regime.
I can't say that they should or shouldn't. I just can give you the fact that what they've been doing has been very effective in bringing havoc in the Russia's oil refining industry. You know that in Rostov region, province, where I'm from, there are quite a few. There's one oil refinery. It was recently built in 2010, something like that. And I know the guy, the owner, former owner who built it. He built it and it was immediately stolen from him. So there's only one oil refinery. It's not big and it's been hit. It's out of operations. But there are a lot of oil storage facilities. Okay, and they were hit left and right. And right now, all remaining storage facilities in Rostov region are on sale. And they go for pennies on a dollar. No one wants to buy them. I saw the ads. Okay. For $500,000, for $300,000, you can buy a large facility that used to cost millions and millions before. Okay. So I'd say that they're doing mighty powerful job, very effective. And I think whoever creates the strategy for Ukraine, military strategy, is nothing short of genius. Okay. If I was them, I'd certainly do the same thing.
And it's extraordinary, given this, that the IMF has decided to come and continue its annual audits of the Russian economy. The idea that they should do that at this time is extraordinary. But also, the IMF has given relatively upbeat reports on the state of the Russian economy throughout this war, which I find extraordinarily delusional. But it has given a lot of material for propagandists, useful idiots, appeasers, and the whole crowd that we see on social media.
Well, Jonathan, your words are like music to my ears when you say extraordinary delusional, because when I sit here in front of the camera and I look at the numbers, and all of a sudden reports coming from the IMF, and they're saying, well, Russian economy has withstood all the sanctions and it's growing, it's doing something right. I'm sitting here and start questioning myself. I mean, it's the IMF, right? It's like these guys. I was an economics student 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And those guys are like semi-gods to me. I studied their reports, and now they're being delusional. And now it makes two of us. You're confirming my words. Think about this. Perhaps they're not so delusional. Perhaps they're just using, according to their procedures, okay, they're using economic data coming from, let's say, Ministry of Finance of every country, including Russia. So they take, and of course, the numbers coming out of Russian government are cooked. So they're using those numbers and they taking them, and time after time, they make fools out of themselves. Fools, okay? And what do they do now? They're thinking, hey, we got to get some better data. So what are we going to do? We're going to go back to Russia and check for ourselves. And this would be a very, very, sound thing to do, to actually establish themselves back in Russia and start looking on the situation from the inside and seeing it with their own eyes, not taking data from Russian Ministry of Finance. So I welcome this decision by the IMF. Okay, at least they will be coming out with their own numbers. Okay,
As long as they don't accept cups of tea for strangers or go too close to any windows.
That's a different story.
Well, we're going to turn to a topic which I think is unfortunately, it's actually I think it's quite a tragic thing about the economy. But when economists talk about it, they use very neutral language. So in Nabiulina's statement, they cited one of the inflationary pressures as being the so-called deficit of cadres. This essentially means they don't have enough people to perform various professional and skilled roles. And there are a lot of open vacancies. And of course, they can't fill them. They can't fill them. We know why they can't fill them, because Putin has sent these people to use their lives in a terrible, wasteful, murderous act. Many of them have died. They will not be coming back. So underlying this neutral jargon of the economists is a tragedy on a huge scale. But of course, that is also going to accelerate Russia's economic problems.
Lack of people is one of the fundamental problems that Russia is having. You cannot grow your economy without people. It's a few components. It's capital. You're going to have investments. You're going to have policies that promote economic expansion. You're going to have infrastructure, and you're going to have entrepreneurs, and you're going to have people. You get finance and you create something, and you need people to build it and to work there. And if you don't have them, then the latest number I heard is 2%. Unemployment is 2%, which is 4% is really bad. 3 is a catastrophe. 2, I've never heard of unemployment being 2% anywhere in the world. Okay, it's not a catastrophe. It's beyond catastrophe. Okay, I know factories in Russia that close down because they simply can't find people. Millions of people are needed, and they're missing for 2 reasons. The reason number 1 is, of course, the war, and many have died or killed in the front lines. Many were maimed. Is this the word? Maimed?
Maimed, yep, that's it.
Maimed. Yeah. Okay. And millions have fled, not coming back. And I know I'm witnessing them. I witness them every day. Russia is in a bad situation for decades, Jonathan, decades, perhaps generations. And it's just one man destroyed the country, just like that, in a couple of years, with his actions, his policies, his craziness. I don't think that Russians realize what has happened to their country and to their lives and to their future, to their children.
I think
they
not.
will.
Yeah,
they will. They will.
It will. I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure. Policymakers in the US fully realize the precarious nature of the problem either. It's just kind of extraordinary. And of course, this isn't one for today's discussion, probably future discussion. But not only has he screwed up the current situation by eliminating all potential opposition, by hollowing out the institutions of the country, and in that classic paranoid way, destroying anybody with any talent who might threaten him. He has cursed the future politics of Russia because he's populated the political stage with sycophants, non-entities, greedy, paranoid, talentless people. And unfortunately, it's going to be quite a tough job to get them out of the way.
It's going to take decades and, well, generations. I look at the Germans, and they're give me hope. They're like beam of hope, beam of light. Because if Germans could have gone through this situation they had, and they could have they could be reborn. Okay, they changed themselves, they changed their society, then there is hope for others. And I just hope that Russia one day will follow the footsteps of Germany.
Absolutely. It's a topic that comes up an awful lot. Well, we'll get back onto the script because we've got just a couple of questions left to cover off. One of them, of course, is that despite, I think, Russian economy going faster and faster into some kind of spiral of doom at the moment, Nabiulin and her team have actually been able to create some relative stability and resilience. Yes, Russian reserves, currency reserves, and so on were being burnt up through that period. So it's not full economic stability, but they have been able to create the semblance of a stability for 2.5 years. And the question here is that I think they were very much aided by the weakness of Western policies, the weakness not of creating a sanctions regime, but really properly enforcing it and trying to sort of find ways to weaken the Russian economy. It seems to me, at least, that the US has only started taking that seriously recently, and the EU has just turned a blind eye to huge exports of products via intermediary companies, which they must have known would end up in Russia. So, to an extent, this last 2.5 years of relative resilience of the Russian economy, I suspect that the West needs to shoulder quite a big part of the blame in enabling that.
Certainly, Russia was aided by quite a few things. Um, some were coincidences, some were not, some were artificially created. Um, Elvira Nabiulina did not help to stop the crisis. She's helped by her policies, she's helped to slow it down, to keep Russia afloat for longer than a lot of people expected. Another reason it happened, Russia had accumulated a very large savings account. Basically, earnings from exports of raw materials of the past, not all were spent, some were saved. And it was a very wise decision by the government, well, unfortunately. And they were saving it and selling Russians this idea that they're going to be using it for large projects that will benefit the future of Russian citizens and their children. And I think one of the foundations was even called the Foundation of Future Generations. Well, what Putin did, he took that money from the future generations and he buried them in Ukrainian steppes. And now the money is gone. So two things were keeping Russia afloat. First is oil revenue from 2022. Well, even from now, from 2023, there were ups and downs, but when there were ups, Russia was earning considerable amount of export revenues and the savings account, big savings account. Now, I gave a lot of thought of why the West, especially the United States, did not act harsher right in the beginning. There could be a reason for that. Because if they cut off Russian oil back then, all at once, then they would just put world markets, global markets into a huge chaos. Okay, the price of oil would raise catastrophically, and they didn't do that. Instead, they have taken a slower approach. Okay, and it worked. It didn't work well. It worked not well in the beginning, but then it's working real well now, better and better. They started introducing secondary sanctions, and everything is working now. And I don't think that Russia has a way out of this bad economic situation. It's like in a swamp, it gets stuck deeper and deeper, okay? And there's no way out. So the tsunami is not around the corner anymore. It's here. We're seeing the storm is above Russia. It's spinning, and those things that were helping in the past are done.
And one of those other nails in the coffin seems to be the dismantling of various financial structures and instruments that were approved by the Chinese state to help both Russian individuals and business to support this import export model. So, this would be various finances and credits and so on. it seems, and we briefly touched on this in the last conversation, it seems that China and Turkey have been withdrawing over the last couple of months support for all of these. First, it was the state approved or state run banks. They created some sort of so called churn and burn banks that could carry on these. But with the advent of secondary sanctions, it seems like they are completely withdrawing and shuttering these sort of processes that were starting to be used to keep the import export flow in Russia going. In the absence of these financial structures, can we expect this whole thing to collapse? I mean, how is that whole import export trade going to be sort of financed and structured? It seems that it won't be.
Not holding well, not holding well at all. There are numerous problems. When the world introduced sanctions upon Russia, Russian officials and Russian Z patriots, they were so proud, running around and letting everyone know, you see, the sanctions not working. You see, the Chinese are helping us, saving us. The Turkish are saving us. There was a talk of Russia being cut off from SWIFT. That's an international banking system identifier. So banks could make payments easy. One of the biggest victories for Russia back in 91 or 92 was that Russian banks were allowed to be a part of a global financial system, and they were being issued SWIFT numbers, okay? And 23 years later? No, 21 years later, the opposite process, okay? Russia was being kicked out. And then the politicians are saying, no, that's not going to happen. Come on. All those Westerners, they're just about money, okay? Imagine what's going to happen if they're going to kick us off out of SWIFT. We go to the Chinese, and together we will create our own system, the competitor to SWIFT. And, SWIFT doesn't need that. This Western banks don't need that, so they will never do that. 2 weeks later, Russian banks started getting banned, okay? And the Chinese came in, but they did not offer any help. I remember there was a trades mission to China, and everyone was like, oh, we're going to come back with victory. We're going to come back with this agreement to create our own SWIFT. They came back, and they were silent about it, as if they never, were going to China to propose this thing. So the Chinese shut them off, okay, quite rudely. Instead, the Chinese used the situation. They opened the branches of their banks. They opened cards to Russians. They started charging astronomical fees for transfers of money. And to open an account for Russian citizen in a Chinese bank in Russia, they charged like $500. And the cards worked for a few months. And then they simply started closing the cards, And in 2023, the United States took it very serious and started talking to the Chinese and to the Turkish, who were still operating, working with Russia, trading with Russia. And, it took very little time for the Turkish to understand. Starting January 1st, 2024, there hasn't been any trade with Turkey. They just shut Russia off, okay? And in February, the Chinese started doing the same thing. Only the big banks, the small ones, like you said, they still traded with Russia. But then came July, and the small banks started refusing payments, transfers. And now, no Russian money can go to China. They're trying to circumvent by using cryptocurrency. The thing is, the Chinese have banned the cryptocurrency. You can go to prison if you use it. And the Chinese banks and companies, they don't want to deal with that. That's not legal way. That's not real business. Okay, so that is another nail in the coffin, one of many, but very significant one. And the thing is, it's not going to get any better. Russians are trying to find ways around it. They fly it here to Uzbekistan. start to reach out as many people. Oh, do you have anyone? Do you know anyone in China? Can we set up a company here? And then, good luck with that. And not happening. So Elvira Nabiulina has mentioned that as a big problem, fundamental problem. But I think not her, but one of her deputies when he spoke. And he urged Russian businessmen to find any means possible to trade with the Chinese, even barter. The thing is, what can Russia offer the Chinese except for oil in order to trade for consumer goods? Nothing. Okay. Um, that's a huge problem. Another one, and not the last nail into the coffin's lid, but definitely one of them.
I'm sure in our next conversation we'll be covering off a few more of them as more of them emerge. Well, we're going to hit the last topic today. Now, neither of us are military experts. So we're not going to talk about Kursk from the sort of battlefield point of view. But I think much more interesting about Kursk is the psychological impact on the regime. And we've seen a really extraordinary thing happen. I think Michael Naki commented on this quite forcefully, that once again, Western policymakers have completely misjudged the reaction of Putin and his propagandists. It was thought that the invasion of Kursk would trigger a huge reaction, that it would be a really big deal and it'd be played up. And we basically put our framework of understanding onto the regime. Quite the opposite has happened. You know, the propagandists are all saying, on the one hand, it's not good, but on the other hand, it doesn't really matter. Putin's come out a couple of times now and basically said, yeah, it's not, it's nothing to worry about. We'll get round to dealing with it at some point. No, Pokrovsk is far, far more important. There's something extraordinary psychological going on here. Are they panicking behind the scenes and trying to sort of put out this front of confidence and assurance? Or do they genuinely really not care about Kursk and these frontline areas? Is Pokrovsk and Ugledar and all these other places, are these actually more important to Putin and his so-called strategy?
Jonathan, what is happening in Russia with Kursk is beyond crazy. I usually every Friday I release a video called Crazy News Update, straight out of the Met Circus. This isn't Met Circus anymore. I don't even know how to call this place and that situation that is going on. You know what? It's funny, but you said either or, but I think it's both. First of all, they don't care of Kursk and what's going Kursk whatsoever. They could care less. And then I think they're also panicking. Panicking for one simple reason. They don't have any resources to drive Ukrainians back. They understand that Ukrainians, if they want, they can expand. They have showed everyone there are no red lines, and the king has no clothes. Basically, I mean, the part of Russia has been occupied. Okay, I call it Ukrainian special military operation. They're rolled into Russia. They fortified their positions. They established temporary administrations, like military civic administrations in Russia, in Russian territory. What the hell is that? And Russian army nowhere to be found. It's been 6 weeks, and Russian army still nowhere. Well, it's slowly getting there, slowly trying to slow down the Ukrainians. There have been fightings for the past couple of days without much of result happening. But the Ukrainians, yesterday, they penetrated Russian border in another place in Kursk region, okay? And they're expanding. They're not being driven back.
In fact, they're coming in behind the Russian
Yes, they're
troops that
trying
were
to
sent. So
encircle
they could
Russian troops.
encircle them. Could be
Yes,
huge.
yes, I mean, look, I'm as far from the military as possible. Okay, I've never been in a military school. But even I understand the very basics of what's going on, and I don't understand how these people who made their profession, to create tactics and strategy for military strikes and defense and so what in the world. I slowly realize Russia doesn't have any of the professionals. I think that's why they're panicking. I mean, you saw how Putin was talking to four people, former Minister of Defense, real Minister of Defense, current, the head of the KGB, and Gerasimov. And that's his last words. No one has ever seen Gerasimov ever since. Okay. And then the head of the KGB was sitting there and he was cringing. It's like, oh my God, what are they talking about? The current Minister of Defense was sitting, they didn't even show his face once. He had nothing to say. He just kept silent, and the former one too. Those guys don't know how to fight. They know how to steal well, They don't have the army. They don't have anyone. They are inadequate. Okay. And Kursk, I don't understand why Russian people are keeping silent about that. That shows the degree of their apathy. 2.5 a quarter of a million of Russians have been displaced. They're refugees now. They're basically homeless, running around Russia begging for relatives to give them place to stay, and then everyone is keeping silent. That's none of our business, and the propaganda people started saying, Kursk was a small part. Russia is big. Look how much land we have in Siberia and in the Urals. So this is beyond med circus.
I mean, if we think
It's
about
unsustainable. Please
it is.
understand, it cannot go like this for a long time. Russia reminds me of a car that is going down the hill, okay, and it's at high speed, but the engine is smoking and it's on fire, and one wheel fell off, another wheel is, wiggling back and forth, and then it's falling apart. It's still going, but it's falling apart. This science, this proof everywhere that it will not go on for long. Things will change sooner or later, well, rather sooner than later.
And they've pulled the handbrake, but it's come off in their hands.
Yeah,
they've literally gone up.
It's like, oh, what do we do now? They press the pedal and it goes down and it's not working. Okay. So this is what Russia is right now. It's not sustainable, this situation for them. And then they just Putin signed a decree to mobilize 180,000 more people. Yeah, very soon.
I mean, you'd hope that someone would say no. At some point, someone would turn up and go, actually, no, I'm not doing this. But of course, we know that won't happen. We know that the people will follow those orders, no matter how insane they are, until literally the wheels come off. I mean, that's likely.
Yes.
It gives us a lot to talk about. We have to remember, at the end of the day, these are real lives, real Ukrainian lives. These are real Russian lives as well. And what's unfolding, despite it being beyond absurd and sometimes humorous, it's also deeply, deeply tragic as well. And I want to impress upon everybody that Konstantin and I, both feel that deeply. But it's also important to discuss. It's also important to give Ukrainians hope, because sometimes Ukrainians will listen to the propaganda that suggests that Russian resources are infinite, that Russian aggression is infinite, that Putin's regime is eternal. None of these things are true, and I think it's important to keep stressing that, and that gives Ukraine hope that it will eventually find the peace and security that it deserves. Konstantin, I've, as always, hugely enjoyed this. It's been massively enlightening as well. I know the audience feel the same way too. Last word, please do help support creators like Konstantin. Go to his channel, take a look. Platforms like YouTube and LinkedIn are being rather unpleasant at the moment to creators. I think you'll all be aware that Konstantin has been demonetized. Therefore, I think it's very important things like Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, and other ways to support creators. If you like what's being produced, if you want to support the kind of strong opinions fighting for democracy, freedom, and peace, such as Konstantin's voice, please do find it in your hearts to give him the support that he needs. But today, thank you so much.
Jonathan, thank you so very much. I want to make you a promise, and everyone, I have been demonetized and it hurts. It's not pleasant, but demonetized or monetized, you can count on me showing up every day and telling the truth of what's happening in Russia and how Ukraine is affected. And I will not stop no matter what. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And I hope to speak to you soon sometimes.